Hi everyone, welcome back to our series. So today we're going to talk about services and Angular routing. So services are classes that allow us to be able to manipulate our data. So whatever data that we need to keep track of and organize, that goes into the service. It's injectable into all of the components that we've created, and routing allows us to assign different paths to different features that we have in our application. So let's go. All right, so we're back in our people app, and as always, the first thing that we're going to do is jump over to our terminal and do an ng serve, and this should bring up our application, and it's going to be running on port 4200, and this is what our application looks like so far. So we have a list of people here, and we have an add person, which again, as I mentioned, this is probably in the wrong place, but we'll deal with that in 1 second. So we're pretty happy with the application so far, and what we want to do is add some better organization to our application. Because if we take a look at what the setup is so far, if we take a look at our app folder, currently under people list is where all of our people are. Now, logically, this doesn't make too much sense because people list is there for printing out the people only. It shouldn't be there for managing the list. So you see we have the on person delete, which actually filters out some people, which again doesn't feel right because it doesn't feel like it's the responsibility of the people list component to be able to do this. So what we want to do is add an overarching service to govern all of our data. So I'm going to move all of this over. So I'm actually going to copy all of this over, and I'm going to comment this out for now. And just so that it doesn't give me any problems, I am going to make this .people equal to empty, an empty array, and we will label this as an any type. And once again, this really should be a person class that we're taking here. All right, so we've copied all of that code over, and the next thing we want to do is to create a service. So we're going to bring up our terminal here, and we're going to do an ng generate, this time service. So the service is going to be an injectable class that we can inject into any of these components. So we're going to call it service, and we're just going to call it people service. So the name for the service is going to be called people. Again, I just want to skip tests here. Okay. And now it's created a service for us. So if we take a look at this people service, this is now injectable into the root. And what injectable means is that imagine this service as a class that I can incorporate and can bring into any of these components here. So if you remember, one of the reasons that we did input and output was that we had a people list, and when the people lists were generating these people, there was actually a person that was inside of that component that when we clicked on delete would have to send a message over to people list for the people list to be able to do that delete. All right, so you can see just explaining that how convoluted and how complex that whole process is. So we want to change that a little bit. And again, the service, once we write it, will be injectable into any of these components that we write. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is let's copy over the people that we have from the people list. So I'm just going to do people, and then this will be an any array of any, and I'm just going to copy all of those names over. All right, so this is currently what we have. I'm just going to close this up for readability. And aside from this constructor, I want to now talk about what kind of services I want to provide. Now, generally, when we're talking about services, these are the operations that I allow on the data that I'm organizing in this class. Now, in this example, this is people, right? But you can imagine other data that we're going to be organizing. So what kind of things can we perform on this data? So usually we think about things like creating, reading, updating, and deleting, right? So this is the CRUD operation for any service that we would write. So here, I'm just going to give you a few examples. I'm going to provide a get operation, and we can call this get. And in this case, what we're going to do is just simply return our this.people. Right, so we can do something like this, and this is going to just, whenever this method is invoked, it will just return the array of people that we have. And similarly, we can do an add, and so we're going to add a new person. So when we add a new person, this will be, again, I'm going to use any type, but you can imagine this should be a class, new person dot added on, and this is where I'm going to create my new date. So new date, and then I'm going to do get time. All right, so you'll notice that it's actually very similar to what we're doing here, but instead of creating it on these people, I'm going to create the date in the exact time that I add this person into the array. All right, then I'm going to do this.people and then push this new person on there. Okay, great. Now at the same time, let's just for debugging purposes do a quick console.log and this.people. All right, so just so we have an idea what it looks like at this moment. Okay, and then finally, we're going to have a delete method. So the delete functionality is going to take a name. So we'll say delete this person. So delete person, and this is going to be in the form of a string. So in theory, what we'd like to do is look up this person and delete them from the array that I have. So this code is actually pretty similar to what we have before. So we'll do this dot people is equal to this dot people. And then I'm going to filter them out. So filter, and I'm going to take every person, and I'm going to do p dot name is not equal to the delete person. All right. So if it's not equal to the delete person, I'll keep them. If they are equal, then I'm going to filter them out. So this is going to reassign our this dot people based on this criteria. And then the final thing I'll do here for the delete is I'm going to return this dot people. So whoever calls this method, I'm going to return it. And this looks good to me. Now, you can add more functionality to this. So for example, you can have an edit person, right? So we can pass in a person to be edited, and we can pass in the object, a new object that it should take on. And you can imagine other things that this service can provide as well. But for our sake, I think this is good enough for now. Okay, and now we're going to go back to our list component.ts. You see right now we have no people, right? And really there's no mechanism to get these people, right? So what I want to do is have this service, or rather the people list, I want them to be able to call this service and to bring in the people dynamically every time this component is rendered. So right now you see that we have nothing, right? And what we want to do is actually bring in something for this list to render. All right, so to do that, I'm going to have the people list do implements on init. Okay. Now on init is something I can bring in from Angular Scope Core, and on init is going to require us to implement one method which is called ng on init. Okay, so you see ng on init is a void function, and it is basically describing what am I going to do on the initialization of this component. Now the difference between what is run on init and the constructor is mostly on init we do calculations and processing, and on the constructor we just initialize variables and stuff like that. All right, so whenever it is initialized, I want to bring this in from the service. Now in order to bring this service in, I have to go to the constructor and I have to create a private variable. So private, we'll call it people service, and I'm going to bring this in from people service. Okay, now automatically you see that it's imported people service from the correct location, right? So now we have access to this. Now remember what I said before, our service is kind of like an injectable which can be injected into any component that we want, right? So in particular, the people list is a component that uses this service. I can bring it in. So here I'm simply going to do this dot people, and I'm going to update these people. So this is going to be this dot people, and I'm going to take this dot ps, right? So the person service, and I'm going to do a get. Now remember what get does. So we jump over here. The get returns the list of people that I currently have in my data, right? So this realistically is coming from a database, but right now we're just putting it into an array, right? So realistically, this should be a database that is called to the back end. Okay, let me make a quick note of this, right? So this is theoretically a call to the backend database. Now, I'm not really going to talk about the backend too much in this series because we're really focusing on the front end, but you can imagine that somewhere I'm getting this list of people that is persistent data. All right, so now back to this. So if we save this, we should be able to see our people again. And at this point, you may have noticed that we really haven't done much, right? So we just basically altered all of this, where all of this list of people is coming from. And currently it is coming from the service instead of from the people list, which makes a lot more sense now. All right, so to just finish this thing off, because here, when we click on a person, it is contacting the people list and it's calling on person delete. So here, instead of filtering this out on this dot people, I'm just going to comment this out, and I am going to call on the service to do this for me. So I'm going to do this dot people is equal to, now I'm going to invoke the service, so people service, and then I'm going to delete this person, this delete person name. Okay, so notice that that is essentially what we're doing. We've just created a method to call in order to make this happen. So this gets deleted. So again, let's follow the execution. When I click on someone to delete, this person component, maybe we can dive in here. So this person component is going to send a on delete, and on delete is going to fire off a delete event with this person name. In the person list, we grab this person name. So you see, we grab this person name, and then we call on the service in order to make this delete. The service is then going to delete this person, and then it's going to return the list of people again. So ultimately, what we have is this people list gets updated from the service. Right? So let's see if this works. So I'm going to delete, and you see that every time we get the feedback that this person got deleted. Okay, so this is great. I'm just going to comment this out because we know this works. So I'm just going to leave that comment. All right, so now if we check back in our people list HTML, you'll see that if we scroll all the way down, there's still this add person form that's here. And when we save someone, we want that to be sent over to the service as well. So let's jump over to our person add form. Okay, so this is our person add form. And when we submit, so on submit, right now we're just console logging, but in reality, what we want to do is send this over to the service. So I'm going to bring in the same service in our constructor. And the way that we do this is we do a private person service, which is people service. And we're going to bring that in. And down here, we're going to log this person. And we've actually done this already. So again, I'm just going to comment this out. I'm going to do this.ps. Now this time I'm going to add this new person. All right, so again, let's follow the execution. When I submit this form, this is going to come over here. It's going to come over to the on submit. It's then going to call on the service to add a person. And now it's going to jump over to people service, and it's going to say add this new person, which is just going to push it onto the list. And then it's going to console this.people. Okay, so let's see how this works. So if we come down here, we're going to add a new person. So we said in the last video that Mary is a proper name for an instructor. So I'm going to add Mary. And as soon as I add Mary, you'll notice that there is now an array of 6. But if we take a look at this people list, what's people list is being printed out is only 5 people. So you see Bobby all the way down to Jacob, but I don't see this new Mary that I've just added. So where did Mary go? Well, the reason why Mary's not showing up is because there is no mechanism right now to tell people list to print Mary. Right? There's no restart or reinitialization of this component. So you can imagine that in such a case that this add person component is not in the right place. Right? So that intuitively tells you that this is the wrong workflow, or at least it's going to become a lot harder to signify to the people list in order to print out Mary again. Okay? Now, I should add that if you really want to add person to be in this component, then we have to do something very similar to what we did with delete. We would have to send a message from the component, from the person component, or in this case, the add component. We have to send an event to people list, and then for the people list to trigger a update of the list of people. Okay, so it is possible, but again, it doesn't really sound like this is the place to put the add person. So in a second, we will actually talk about how to rectify this. All right, so everything looks good right now. And now I want to be able to separate these responsibilities a little bit. So the next thing we want to talk about is Angular routing. Okay, so Angular routing is a way that we can separate pages in our application so that it shows one thing based on the condition or based on a URL path that we're going to assign it. So as I said before, this add person is currently in the wrong position. So if you think about the visual picture that we should have in our mind is that we start with our app.modules.ts, and basically this defines where the component starts. This defines the root of the application, which is the app.component. So in the app.component currently, it is calling the people list, and the people list is responsible for taking the list and then calling the person component to print those out. And we said in order to communicate this, we pass in the inputs into the person component. At the same time, the person component is going to reply with an output whenever there's a delete event that is heard. And what we've done so far is that we've also added a person add form, which is part of this people list component, and this is not updating the list correctly. Now, what we've also done is we've defined a service which we said can be injected into any of these components that we want. It could be as high as the people list and as low as the person add form, right? So any of these components that we've created can inject this people service in there. Now, what we want to do in the next couple of steps is we want to add another component, which is the person view. And the person view is what's going to happen when we click on the show more button. It's going to navigate to another page that's just going to show you more information about this person. Now, we said that this person add form is really in the wrong place. So another thing that we want to do is actually move it to a separate location which is going to be governed by routing. Now, we're going to see that in a second. We can add a couple of routes, one for person adding, one for looking at people, and another one for looking at a particular person. So this is what we want to do. So let's jump back into our components, and this time I'm going to create a routing module. And to do that, we're going to do an ng generate. This time it's going to be a module. Okay, and this module is going to be called routing. So notice that we actually are using a couple of modules already. So one module that we're currently looking at is obviously the app.module. Another one was the forms module, and another one was the reactive forms module. So we have all of these modules that we're using already, and here we're actually creating a custom module. All right, so I'm going to add a flag in here, which is going to point to the module that it's associated with. And I'm going to say that this module that I'm creating is associated with the app module. Okay, so this is the app.module. And in a second, you'll see what that looks like. I'm going to add another flag, which is flat. So by default, if you remember, every time we create a component, there's a folder that is added. So this one, I really don't want a folder associated with it. I actually want it to be on the same level as my app module. This really is up to you. Okay, so I'm going to create this, and what we're given is that we have this routing.module.ts. It's also updated the app.module for us. So if we take a look at the app.module, you see that our routing module is here, and it's also added it into our imports. And this is important because you see that we've been using our browser module, we've been using the forms module and the reactive forms module. This is just like any other module that we're incorporating in here. Right, so you see, first of all, that we have an ng module that defines the functionality of what we're doing here, what this class is doing. And what we need to do is define some routes here. All right, so the first thing we'll do is we'll do a const app routes. And our app routes is going to be of type routes. Okay, and routes is an array. And I'm just going to bring this in as a definition. It's going to be imported from Angular scoped router. And it's going to have a list of objects, which are path objects. Now, path objects are basically ones that contain the property path, and the first path that I'm going to define is called people. The next one is the component. So the component is, what is this component? What is this path associated with? And I'm going to say this is associated with the people list component. So whenever I go to an endpoint which says people, I want it to display the people list component. All right, I'm going to define a few more paths, and I'm going to show you what I mean by all of this. So the next one I'm going to define is person/add. This is really just up to me what I call these endpoints, but the component here is going to be associated with the person add form. I'm going to have another path, which is the person / now I'm going to give it a dynamic variable called name, and I want you to remember this for later on. So the component that is associated with is going to be a person view, which I actually haven't created yet. So let me just very quickly jump down here and create that. I'm going to do an ng generate a component, and I'm going to do skip tests again. And I'm going to also associate it with the module equal to app, and I'm going to call this the person view module. All right, now you might be asking, how come I didn't put a module before when I was creating a component? The reason is because now we have multiple modules that we've defined, and we have a app module as well as a routing module. So I have to specify that this thing is related to the app module. Right, so I'm going to create this, and now you can see this is like any other component that we've created. And now we can associate this component with the person view component. All right, great. Now, one last thing I want to add here is that because all of these paths have endpoints, I should define something that is the base as well. So I'm going to go to redirect to people. Okay, so this just says that if I'm going to the root of the application, then I'm going to redirect this to people. Because if we take a look here, oh, actually, let me finish this and then I'll talk about what that means. So path match, I'm going to make it full. So it has to match the full path before I get the redirect. All right, so I'm going to define those for now. And what I mean by path is, if you take a look at currently our application, we can have a lot of interaction. We can delete, we can search, we can, well, theoretically still hit save, but we are stuck on this URL. We're basically stuck on this page. So basically what we're describing in terms of paths is that now we can come in here and we can type in people, and this is going to redirect me to this component. We can also do something like person/add, and this is going to redirect me to this component, the person add form component, and so on. Okay, but we need one last thing here, which is we need to import the router module for to perform these actions for us. So we're going to do router module and then dot. There is this for route method that I'm going to call, and we have to pass in our app routes. So these are the paths that we define for this router that we're going to use in our application. Now, in addition to this, we also have to do exports. So we need to do the exports of the router module. Okay, now this now is able to define the routing for me. Okay? So just like what we saw in our picture, this router is going to be can be applied to all of the components that are underneath this hierarchy. All right, so let's take a look at how to apply this. So if we take a look at app-component.html, so currently it's printing out the title. So you see currently it's printing out the title, right? And it's also printing out app people list. So that's all it's doing right now. It has no way of having any type of routes. So instead of app people list, I'm going to do a router dash outlet. And router outlet is going to say, okay, instead of printing out a particular component, I want the router to decide which component goes here. Okay, so if we do this, we should be able to come back, and if we go to the root of the application now, you'll see that it gets redirected to people, which is good. And we can now also go to person/add, and this should show me the add form. All right, now while we're here, this doesn't look too good to me, so I'm just going to make a little bit of a change. I'm going to go to the CSS of the person add form, and right now I've centered the legend, which I like, but I'm also going to add a little bit to my form. I'm going to give it some width, so let's do width. We'll do 80 viewport width just to match what we had in the people list. I'm going to have a little bit of padding. I'm going to have a margin, and let's just keep it like that. All right, so okay, this looks a lot better to me. So this is how we add a person. I'm going to interact with the form and then hit save, and then we have some error messages at the bottom. All right, so this looks good to me. So the next thing is, how do we actually navigate? So if I go to the root of the application, I really have no way of getting to the form. And in fact, I'm still printing out the add person at the bottom here, right? So I want to make a couple of changes where I have a link so that I can redirect people to be able to add a new person as well as get rid of this form. All right, so let's come over here to people list, and I'm going to delete this because this is printing out the person add form. I don't want that anymore. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to give an anchor tag, and instead of href, we'll do a router link, and this router link is going to go to person/add. So I hope you understand intuitively where this is going. This is going to the path, right? And I'm going to say add new person. All right, great. And I'm going to give it a BR just for spacing. And now hopefully this will show up. And when I click on this people app, it's going to jump here. All right, so when I add a new person, I want it to also navigate back to the people, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to go into our person add form.ts. You see here is where I submit the person. And I'm going to come over here, and in the constructor, I'm going to bring in the router. Okay, so I'm going to do a private router, and I'm going to bring in this router. All right, so this router is injected into this component. So now I can use this router. I can do this dot router dot, and there's a method called navigate where I can navigate over to, well, I'll navigate to people, but I could just as easily navigate to the root of the application. All right, so now when we go to add person, I can create Mary and make her an instructor and do save, and now it navigates over to this main component, and you see there is Mary. Okay, the reason why Mary is showing up here is because we're navigating over to the component. The component is then initializing itself by calling the array, and this will get Mary for us. All right, so the last thing I want to do here is let's link up one more thing, which is when I do show more, I want to navigate to the page, which is viewing the person. Okay, so I'm going to come back to our our person, and instead of on delete, I want to create a method called on view. Now on view is going to require this router again, so I'm going to create this router. So private, we're going to call it router, which is router. Okay, and I'm going to bring that in again from our Angular scope router, and in this case, I'm going to do this dot router dot navigate. Okay, and I am going to navigate over to this /person. Now, one thing that I wanted to show you before is when we go to the path person slash, and we do Bobby, right? So you can see that there is actually a variable here, right? So this is actually routing to our view, our person view. So whatever we type in here, right, that is the person that I'm looking at. Okay, so this is what we call an activated route. So I want to actually define an activated route here for this purpose. All right, so I'm going to navigate over to person, and I'm going to send in this dot person dot name. All right, so in essence, what this is going to do is it's going to navigate over to the person's name. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to go back to my app, and when I click show more, it is going to, oh, I forgot to call on view. So let's come back to our person component, and this right here is where I want to add that. Okay, so I want to do the click. So on click, I want to call this on view. All right. Okay, so hopefully it works now. So you see this now goes to Bobby, and if I click on somebody else, this is going to go to Sarah. All right, so one last thing I want to do here, which is come over to this person view, and let's see how we can actually use this in our program. So in our class, we want to bring in this string, and we'll just call this p name, which is the string of that person in the URL. And this is going to be called a activated route. So in our constructor, I'm going to create a private activated route, which is of type activated route. So you can see that it's coming in from Angular router, and it's just going to be a constructor, but this p name is going to then be initialized by this dot activated route dot snapshot dot params, and then we're going to take in the name. All right, so I hope you remember what we call name. So way back when we created the routing, we called this part the name, right? So the path person slash, and we call this the name. So this is what we're accessing currently for this p name. Okay, now in here, instead of saying person view, I'm going to interpolate the p name. And the rest of this I will leave for you as an exercise. So in this p name should probably be used to edit the person somehow, or to show more data somehow. You can probably be creative with what you do with this p name. So you see here now it says person view Sarah, and then we also have others, right? So I can show Steve, I can show others, right? So this is going to give me more information. Okay, so this is just really a skeleton of a typical CRUD application and its workflow. I would invite you to play around with this application, add few things, add more components, and play around with everything that you can do. So this is all I have for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.